When were you last over here?
Stan Laurel's funny face made millions laugh, but behind that smile was a broken heart. His baby son died after just 9 days, his marriages fell apart one by one, and his wife accused him of trying to bury her alive. He lost his money and his homes, and when Hardy died in 1957, a part of Stan died too. But what followed in his final years was far more devastating. It's nearly impossible not to cry. He was born Arthur Stanley Jefferson in a tiny house in Ulverston, England, on June 16, 1890. His family lived and breathed theater. His father managed theaters, wrote plays, and acted. His mother had been a shop assistant before turning into a stage actress. But Stan was a sickly kid. While his parents toured, he stayed with his grandmother, far from the spotlight. Still, he became obsessed with it. He built toy theaters, played with puppets, and put on shows for neighbors, complete with costumes and makeup. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a quiet rehearsal for the future. When he was 15, everything changed. His family moved to Glasgow to be closer to the Metropole Theatre, which his father ran. Stan got into Queen's Park School, but he didn't care much for books. He skipped class often. Instead, he sneaked off to perform with his friend Willie Walker's little group. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It gave him something school never could, an audience. And that's all he ever wanted. In 1906, just before turning 16, he snuck into the legendary Britannia Panopticon Music Hall without telling his dad. He wore one of his father's prize suits and went on stage. The crowd laughed, but the real shock came when he looked into the audience and saw his father staring back at him. Panicked, Stan bolted off stage and ripped the coat on a hook. He was terrified, but after the show, his father simply said, "Not bad, son. Have a whiskey and soda." That moment said it all. He had earned his place on stage. Not long after, his father pulled some strings and got him a job in a traveling pantomime company. They performed comic versions of fairy tales. It wasn't easy. He had to learn timing, movement, and how to read a crowd. They did show after show, sometimes more than one a day, but he was learning fast. These weren't just kids' shows. They were training grounds. Then came Fred Carno. Carno was the king of comedy in Britain. He ran a troupe of performers known for their physical sketches. In 1909, when Stan was 19, Carno hired him. Soon after, he became understudy to a young comic named Charlie Chaplin. That was huge. They traveled together, performed together, even lived together during tours. Carno's shows didn't use spoken lines. Everything was physical. It forced Stan to master body language, timing, and subtlety. He watched Chaplin carefully, but he never tried to copy him. He was finding his own rhythm. In 1912, Carno's troupe went on another tour to America. Stan didn't know it then, but this trip would change his life. He was struggling in England and barely making ends meet. The offer to tour the United States came just in time. He thought it would be temporary. It wasn't. When the tour ended, Chaplin left for Hollywood. The bookings dried up, the troupe disbanded, and most went home. Stan didn't. He stayed. He was 22, broke, but full of hope. Stan Laurel knew there was something waiting for him in America. For years, he drifted through vaudeville, often playing Chaplin-style roles. He and May Dolberg, his partner on and off stage, formed a duo. They lived like husband and wife, though never married. In 1917, they made a short film called Nuts in May. It didn't go far, but it was a screen debut. It featured Stan at his best, physically awkward and endearing. He even stole a steamroller in the film, which became a recurring gag in later years. Around this time, May told him that Stan Jefferson had 13 letters. She thought it was bad luck, so he changed his name to Stan Laurel. The new name felt lighter, more hopeful. But success didn't come overnight. For years, he was stuck in small roles, odd sketches, and forgotten comedies. He was funny, but producers didn't know what to do with him. Then came Joe Rock. By 1924, Rock saw Stan's potential, but May had become a problem. She demanded roles, clashed with producers, and fought with Stan backstage. Rock gave Stan a 12-film contract with one condition. May had to go. When she refused, Rock bought her a ticket to Australia and paid her to leave. It was harsh, but it cleared the way. Stan made comedies like Detained, Pie, and Dr. Pickle and Mr. Pride. These weren't blockbusters, but they showed something important. He had found his own style, quiet, gentle, expressive. He didn't fight the chaos. He reacted to it, and people laughed. In 1925, Stan Laurel joined Hal Roach Studios, but not as a star. He was hired to write and direct. In just over a year, he worked on at least 22 films behind the camera. One of those was a comedy called Yes, Yes, Nanette. It had Oliver Hardy in a small role. At the time, no one thought much of it. Laurel didn't even act in it, but everything changed when Hardy got hurt in a kitchen accident. He was hospitalized, and the studio needed someone to step in, so they called Laurel. He wasn't thrilled, but he returned to acting for a short film called Get Young. That one decision, just filling in, would change his life forever. Laurel and Hardy had already appeared together once years earlier, back in 1921. They filmed The Lucky Dog. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't even memorable. They were in a few scenes together, but they weren't a team. After that, they didn't see each other for 2 or 3 years. Hardy kept working. He played every kind of role, hero, villain, even dressed as a woman. He made 177 short films with the Vim Comedy Company. Laurel, on the other hand, was struggling. He tried to make it on his own. He tried different studios. He tried different names, but nothing really clicked. Most of the time, American audiences only saw him as a Chaplin copy or a goofy burglar. It wasn't enough. Even the people behind the camera didn't know what to do with him. He bounced from Metro to Universal, then back to Hal Roach. In 1926, he had talent, but no one knew how to use it. His real name was Arthur Stanley Jefferson, but he started going by Stan Laurel after making a film with May Dolberg called Nuts in May. He didn't even legally change his name until 1931. It was a messy phase of his life, but it forced him to sharpen his comedy instincts. He didn't know it yet, but he was getting ready for something bigger. In 1927, Putting Pants on Philip arrived. It was their first official film as a duo. Laurel played a clueless Scottish boy wearing a kilt. Hardy played his embarrassed American uncle. The story was simple, but it worked. It was Laurel's idea, based on an old story he'd heard from a friend. People loved it. Film historians later said it was one of their most unique comedies. The Stan and Ollie look wasn't quite there yet, but the magic was. Leo McCary, a director at Roach Studios, saw the spark immediately. He told the studio, "Keep them together." That one line led to 107 films over 3 decades. Then came the sound. For most silent film actors, it was a career killer, but not for Laurel and Hardy. In 1929, they released Unaccustomed as We Are. It was their first talking picture, and it worked. Laurel's voice was soft, high-pitched, almost childlike, but made people laugh and it fit. While other comedians stumbled, Laurel and Hardy moved forward. Behind the scenes, Laurel started taking control. He rewrote scenes, encouraged improvising, and spent hours in the editing room. Officially, there were directors and writers on set, but everyone knew who was really in charge. Roach later admitted it. Laurel bossed production. By 1929, he was the main writer. Their writing sessions were wild, chaotic, but full of ideas. Hardy didn't mind. He once joked, "I just did the gags, that was enough," especially after falling into so many mud holes. In May 1930, Stan Laurel was riding a wave of success. He and Oliver Hardy were becoming one of the most loved comedy teams in Hollywood. That same month, his wife, Lois, gave birth to their second child. It was a boy. They named him Stanley Robert Laurel. He was born 2 months early and very small, but for a brief moment, their home was filled with hope and happiness. Most fans don't know this, but at that time, Stan's legal name was still Arthur Stanley Jefferson. He didn't officially become Stan Laurel until 4 years later. That meant the baby's real surname was Jefferson, not Laurel. Still, the little boy's arrival felt like a fresh beginning. Stan and Lois already had a daughter, born in 1927. Now they had a son, too. Despite Stan's busy filming schedule, The couple had wanted another child, and now he was here. But that joy didn't last long. The baby was too weak. His tiny body struggled from the moment he was born. Just 9 days after his birth, Stanley Robert Laurel died. The loss crushed Stan and Lois. It wasn't just a heartbreak. It was a wound that never healed. Stan never talked much about it in public. He made millions laugh, but inside, he was grieving. The timing made it even worse. Just as the world was celebrating Laurel and Hardy, Stan was living through a private nightmare. The doctors had warned them. Back then, there were no advanced machines to help premature babies. Every hour felt like a battle, and in the end, they lost. From that day on, May was never the same for Stan. Friends said he would often become quiet and withdrawn around his son's birthday. Sometimes he'd vanish on set. Between scenes, he returned with red eyes, but still delivered perfect comedy. It was as if he used laughter to cover the pain. Between 1930 and 1935, Stan's career hit new heights. He made about 45 films in just 5 years, many of which were huge hits. In 1932, the Music Box even won an Academy Award. But at home, things were falling apart. The sadness over their son's death slowly pulled Stan and Lois apart. They tried to keep things together, but it was no use. Their grief had built a wall between them. The more Stan worked, the more distant they became. By the end of 1934, after 8 years of marriage, they divorced. Court papers later showed they'd already been living apart for over a year. Stan buried himself in work, while Lois shut herself off emotionally. Their daughter, Lois Jr., stayed mostly with her mother. She was only 7 years old. Later, Lois Jr. lived a full life and passed away in 2017 at the age of 89, just a month after his divorce. Stan remarried. Her name was Virginia Ruth Rogers. Friends said he was trying to escape his past, but the marriage didn't last. In court, Stan admitted something shocking. He was still in love with Lois, his first wife. Virginia must have been heartbroken. They divorced in 1937, but that wasn't the end. In a strange twist, Stan married her again in 1941 and divorced her again in 1946. No children came from either marriage, but their on and off story became gossip all over Hollywood. Still, Stan wasn't done with love or drama. On New Year's Day in 1938, Stan married again. This time, it was a Russian actress named Vera Ivanova Shvilova. People knew her as Ilana. The wedding shocked everyone. It came just days after his last divorce. Virginia accused him of bigamy. The timing was messy, and so was the relationship. They married 3 times in 4 months just to make sure it was legal. The press loved it, and their fights became headlines. Stan was now seen as the funny man with a chaotic love life. Then came the most insane part. In 1938, Ilana accused Stan of trying to bury her alive. Yes, she said he tried to kill her in their own backyard. The claim was wild. People didn't know what to believe. Stan had always played a gentle, goofy character. Now fans were hearing about a dark and dangerous version of him. Ilana ran from their home and went public with her story. There was never full proof, but the damage was done. His reputation took a serious hit. By 1940, the marriage was over. Ilana agreed to give up the Laurel name in exchange for $6,500, a large sum at the time. Between 1926 and 1946, Stan went through 8 wedding ceremonies with 5 different women. Some weddings were invalid, some were repeated. It was like a soap opera, and it all happened while he was creating timeless comedy on screen. After all that, in 1946, he married one last time. Her name was Ida Kataiva Raphael. She was a Russian opera singer. This marriage lasted for 19 years, until Stan's death in 1965. Ida stayed by his side. She was there through the ups and downs, through his decline after Oliver Hardy died in 1957, and through his final days. Meanwhile, it was 1932 when everything changed for Laurel and Hardy. They had already made audiences laugh for years, but the Music Box made them legends. It looked simple, a piano delivery, but this piano wasn't just heavy. It had to be dragged up an endless staircase. Every time they got close, it fell again and again. People watched in theaters, bursting with laughter as the piano rolled down like fate itself was against them. They weren't just being funny. They were making history. That short film won them an Oscar, the very first Academy Award ever given for a comedy short. And even now, almost a century later, that staircase is still there. Tourists visit it like it's holy ground. But here's what most people didn't know. Stan Laurel wasn't just a guy who scratched his head and cried when things went wrong. Behind the scenes, he was the brain, the writer, the editor, the one who actually called the shots. By 1929, he had taken full control of the creative process. If a director wanted something but Stan didn't, it didn't happen. Hal Roach, their producer, admitted that openly. Laurel didn't take credit, but he had final say. He rewrote scenes, timed every joke, cut and recut films until the rhythm was perfect. And Hardy? He was fine with it. "I earned my money," he once said, "just by falling in mud and getting hit all day." Their on-screen magic came from contrast. Hardy was big, over 6 feet tall, close to 280 pounds. He looked like a boss, acted like he knew everything, and always made a mess of it. Laurel was smaller, soft-spoken, confused, but don't be fooled. His innocent face had a sharp comic brain. He was the one people underestimated, on screen and off. Together, they didn't follow the usual pattern of funny man and straight man. They both took turns being the fool. That's what made them different, and audiences during the Great Depression connected to that. They saw themselves in the chaos, the struggle, and the laughter. Their work schedule was brutal. From 1930 to 1940, they made over 40 films. That's more than 4 every year. And these weren't just talking heads in front of the camera. Laurel and Hardy did their own stunts. No doubles, no tricks. Real falls, real bruises. In the music box, they dragged a 500-pound piano up and downstairs over and over until their bodies gave out. You could see the sweat, the limps, the genuine pain behind the laughs. And that's just one film. In 1935 alone, they shot 5 full productions. Tit for Tat, The Fixer-Uppers, Thicker Than Water, Bonnie Scotland, and The Bohemian Girl. That's the kind of schedule that breaks people. But not them. Stan Laurel's fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, humiliating, and heartbreaking. It started in the late 1930s when his partnership with Hal Roach fell apart. Roach had structured the contract so Laurel and Hardy's would expire at different times. It was a power move, and when Laurel's contract ran out, Roach didn't wait. He paired Hardy with another comedian, Harry Langdon, in Zenobia. It was a slap in the face. Roach even floated the idea of replacing Laurel altogether with a new series called The Hardy Family. Laurel fought back. He sued Roach, a risky move that could have ended everything. Eventually, they settled, and Laurel returned briefly to finish 2 more films, A Chump at Oxford and Saps at Sea. But that was it. Their time at Roach Studios was over. The cracks had become too deep. Their move to 20th Century Fox and MGM in the early 40s seemed like a step up, but it wasn't. It was a disaster. Laurel had always been the brains behind their comedy. He rewrote scripts, directed scenes without credit, and led chaotic, fun brainstorming sessions. But in the new studios, he was just a hired actor. No say, no control, nothing. They made 8 films between 1941 and 1944. The budgets were around $300,000 to $450,000 each. Not huge, but the films made money. Still, the magic was gone. Laurel and Hardy were no longer artists. They were products. The studios only cared about the profits. Even when Fox gave them a bit more creative freedom later, it was too late. The damage had already been done. Their final Hollywood film, The Bullfighters, came out in 1945. It was meant to be funny. Laurel even played a double role, bringing back memories of his silent film days. But something fell off. The energy wasn't there. The film made people smile, but it didn't feel like classic Laurel and Hardy. Behind the scenes, Fox was shutting down its B-movie division. The studio didn't see them as stars anymore, just aging comedians from a different era. So, Atoll K in 1950 was supposed to be their comeback, a European production with full creative control, and a huge paycheck of $150,000 each, plus profits. But it turned into a nightmare. The crew spoke 6 different languages, communication broke down, and filming was chaos. Laurel got sick. He had dysentery, a prostate infection, and lost over 40 pounds. Hardy's heart problems flared up. The heat, the stress, and his 300 pounds weight didn't help. What was meant to be a 12-week shoot dragged on for nearly a year, and the script was rewritten every day. When the film finally came out in 1951, fans were shocked. Laurel looked like a ghost, and the comedy felt stiff. Atoll K flopped. It marked the end of their film career. They would do some stage shows after that, but Hardy's health kept getting worse. By 1954, it was all over. Laurel's personal life was just as messy. By 1946, he was paying alimony to 3 ex-wives at once. His first wife, Lois Nielsen, divorced him in 1934. He married Virginia Ruth Rogers in 1935, divorced her by 1937, then married Alana Shalova in 1938. That ended too. He paid her $6,500 just to drop the Laurel name in 1941. He remarried Virginia Ruth again in 1941, but they divorced again in 1946. Court papers showed that 65% of his income was going toward alimony, 65% for a man making thousands per film. He was still struggling to stay afloat. Just when things couldn't get worse, Mae Dolberg returned. She had been his partner in vaudeville years ago, and she claimed he had promised her lifetime support. In 1937, she sued him. She came to court with scrapbooks and stories. Laurel looked sick just hearing them. The court case got attention. Dolberg said she wanted $350 a month, about $6,500 in today's money. Even though the case was settled quietly, Laurel had to pay legal fees and a new monthly obligation. From 1937 to 1944, Laurel lost around $360,000. That's over $6.5 million today. The money disappeared because he trusted the wrong people, mainly his cousin Edgar, who had no financial training. Edgar invested in failing oil ventures, losing $175,000 in one go. He also didn't file Laurel's taxes for 3 years, which brought a $42,000 penalty from the IRS. Laurel's drinking didn't help. One night in 1940, after heavy drinking, he bought 3 luxury cars he couldn't even drive. His eyesight was too bad. He also failed to secure a fair contract with 20th Century Fox in 1941. No creative control, no ownership of the characters. He was just working for hire. By 1944, he was borrowing money from Hardy to pay his bills. His home life collapsed too. In 1942, he had to sell his 18-room mansion in Cheviot Hills at a 40% loss. It had a pool, tennis courts, and a private screening room, all gone. He looked defeated. Furniture was auctioned off, and his beloved 1938 Rolls-Royce Phantom III was sold for just $1,200. By 1943, he was living in a small 2-bedroom.